By late May 2025, my sister was staring down felony charges. A red Ferrari was leaving our driveway on a flatbed, and a judge's protective orders plus hospital HIPAA restrictions barred my parents from any access to my grandfather or his records. That is how far it went before anyone in my family stopped calling me dramatic. I'm Madison Hale, 32 VP of Marketing in New York City. I take the 612 home to Greenwich, Connecticut, where the hedges are trimmed, like they have a publicist and the neighbors wave just enough to be polite. I always thought betrayal would look like a Hollywood scene. It doesn't. It looks like autopay. It looks like, can you cover this month and we'll square it later? It looks like love weaponized by people who know your soft spots. What they didn't know was I document everything. I'm the person who names files the year, month, day down to the minute. PDFs, emails, bank statements. If you've ever sat at a kitchen table and explained your budget to people who treat your income like a community chest, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has to travel to find the person who needs it. Here's the baseline, because every good plan needs a ledger. In 2000, and after my first big bonus hit, I created what I called the Grandpa Care Fund. I funneled RSUs as they vested stacked bonuses and kept the account separate so no one could call it extra. By early 2025, it stood at $3.96 million. That wasn't magic. It was compounding vest schedules and a promise to the man who taught me to read the business section like scripture. His name is Edward. He's 82. He is the only person I've never once had to recover from trusting. Now the part I used to call generosity and now call a paper trail. From May 2022 through April 2025, I paid my parents' mortgage $9,000 a month. I floated 2 family credit cards $4,000. I covered my sister's car $2,000 because a professional image apparently needs a supercar to accessorize it. $15,000 a month for 36 months. $540,000. I make about $600 a year before equity, so on paper it seemed doable. In reality, it was a slow bleed I hid behind a straight face and a calendar full of quick calls. Family dynamics in one sentence. I am the responsible daughter. Lydia, my younger sister, is the golden child. My father Richard loves a big idea and a small bill. My mother Diane can spin a crisis into a favor owed in less than a minute. Growing up, I self-funded college and learned to negotiate rent with roommates who collected vintage plants. Lydia collected attention. The spotlight followed her, and somehow the bill followed me. Plant this now because it becomes everything later. In 2021, after Grandpa stabilized, we revoked the power of attorney I'd held for his care. We filed that revocation with the bank. We didn't announce it to my parents because it wasn't their business. That revocation matters. So, does this the signature on 3 later wire forms is mine only if you squint and pretend I forgot how to spell my own name. And this there are 4 receipts for 1 kilogram gold bars purchased the same week a large chunk of the fund disappeared. Finally, there's a storage unit I never rented opened with a gate code tied to someone in my family, and a timeline that when you line it up with audit logs fits together like someone practiced. I didn't know any of that the morning this started. What I knew was that a balance I checked every Tuesday before coffee read 0. Just 0. If you've ever seen a number fall out of a screen and take the air with it, you know that particular silence. I did what I always do. I wrote the time down. Then I called the branch manager and asked for audit history. I did not demand a refund. I did not accuse anyone over the phone. I asked for logs and I asked for the process because in the United States, process is how you turn truth into something useful. 2 dates matter as we move forward, so I'll set them here for continuity with the rest of the story. On April 12th, 2025, at my sister's baby shower, pastels, cupcakes, and conversations about stroller brands, a process server calmly handed her a packet. No scene, no shouting, just a signature and a turn toward the door. I opened my phone. Air played a simple timeline, no raw evidence, just dates and what each date meant, and told the room I would be linking to public filings as they posted. On May 3rd, 2025, at 2:17 a.m., in an ICU hallway, a detective named Priya Kapoor would ask my family a sentence that changed the temperature of my life. We'll get there. That one is coming. For now, I want you to understand the setup. My job trains me to build campaigns, but it also trained me to build cases. I didn't wave papers in anyone's face. I put a clean story in order. A revoked POA on file since 2021, signatures that don't match my hand. 4 gold bar receipts that track to a specific day. A storage facility, access timeline that was later confirmed through proper channels, and a fund meant for a man who still asks me if I'm sleeping enough when I sit by his bed. What my family didn't know, what almost no one who tries this kind of theft understands, is that calm people with good records are very dangerous to lies. If you've ever told yourself it's easier to pay than to fight, I get it. I told myself that for 3 years, but the moment you see zero, the math changes. You stop being the cushion and start being the spring that snaps back hard enough to leave a mark. Looking back now, the pattern wasn't dramatic. It was domestic. It was the slow, soft kind of erosion that happens when love and obligation get braided together so tightly you can't see the knot anymore. On paper, I could afford it. In practice, it was a second job I never applied for. From May 2022 through April 2025, I underwrote my family's life like it was a brand I was paid to build. $9,000 a month to keep my parents' colonial on the right side of the mortgage company. $4,000 across 2 credit cards that always seemed to be within a few hundred of the limit because there was always a reason. $2,000 for my sister's car because a professional image apparently needed a supercar to match the filter. $15,000 every month, 36 times, $540,000 in total. The transfers sat on my statements like fence posts, regular, even, almost respectable. I grew up as the responsible daughter in a house that rewarded last-minute miracles more than steady effort. Richard, my dad, loves a plan as long as it's his and someone else pays for it. Diane, my mom, can turn a simple favor into a family myth. Remember when we all pulled together? Madison, Lydia, my sister, learned early that if she insisted, someone would absorb the landing. I learned to be the landing. Here's what that looked like in real numbers and normal scenes. In 2022, a temporary tax surprise became 6 months of just until we catch up. I set the payments to autopay because I was traveling for a product launch. That was my mistake. Autopay makes generosity look like structure. In 2023, a hospital bill arrived 2 weeks after Grandpa came home from a scare. Insurance covered most of it. I covered the part insurance didn't because I refused to let anyone talk about money in his room. Around the holidays, Lydia called twice in 1 week. First, it was a rental deposit that fell through because a roommate bailed. Then it was a networking conference where she swore the right handbag would read as credibility. I told myself image matters in her field. I told myself everyone starts somewhere. I told myself a lot of things that were technically true but emotionally convenient. I self-funded college. I had roommates, a mattress on the floor for a while, and a habit of budgeting with a highlighter. Lydia had a different path. She took a tour through majors that looked great on a parent newsletter, then an internship she never finished, then the impression that someone else would spot her potential if the setting was right. I learned to negotiate salary. She learned to negotiate sympathy. That sounds cruel. It isn't. It's anatomy. Families teach you who you are, and they repeat the lesson until you either accept it or rewrite it. Looking back now, I can see the tells I stepped over. My dad would use the same line to end any argument about money. We are family. Money is a tool. You make the most so you can handle this. It landed like a compliment and functioned like a leash. My mom would say your grandfather would hate to see us divided over a number. She wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete. He would also hate to see me subsidize everyone's refusal to grow up. I didn't say that out loud because I was busy solving things. The Grandpa Care Fund existed outside of all this noise. In 2010, I started it with my first real bonus. RSUs vested, I moved the shares, and I kept the account clean. By early 2025, it was $3.96 million. Not lottery money. Not quit and disappear money. Care money. Stability money. I filed every document attached to that account like it might one day have to defend itself. When Grandpa stabilized in 2021, we revoked the power of attorney I held and filed the revocation with the bank. We didn't announce it to my parents because we didn't need their permission to do the right thing. That detail becomes the spine of the entire story. Small frictions started to show up in 2024, and I treated them like static. A private banker left me a message asking to confirm current documentation on file. I called back, emailed the revocation again, and got a polite note thanking me. It didn't occur to me that someone had been shopping the old document around or warming a relationship. In December, Lydia texted from a boutique, "Do you mind if I use the card and I'll Zelle you tonight?" I minded. I said fine. Zelle is neat for roommates splitting delivery. It is a terrible boundary between adults who refuse to plan. When nothing came back, I told myself she forgot, and I let it go because I was tired, and it was almost Christmas. The emotional ledger had its own math. When I landed my promotion, the message thread lit up with heart emojis and jokes about Aunt Madison's bonus. When I missed one Sunday dinner because I was on a plane, I got a paragraph about priorities. I could move a meeting for family, could I not? The subtext was always the same. You have the capacity, we have the need. What kind of person would you be if you said no? So I almost never did. Looking back now, the 3-year timeline reads like a training program for what came next. Everyone learned I would say yes if someone sounded urgent. Everyone learned I would pay faster than I would argue. I learned to carry 2 phones and a power bank because quick call turned into crisis call more often than it didn't. There were no villains on any given Tuesday. There were just decisions that made the next decision easier for them and harder for me. 2 scenes keep replaying when I try to explain how ordinary it all felt. One is me at my dining table on a Friday night, approving a mortgage payment while half listening to a podcast about leadership, telling myself that this is what grown-ups do. They take care of things. The other is my sister FaceTiming me from a parking garage laughing because the valet recognized the car and waved her through like she was someone. She said, "See, this is what Brand does." I smiled. I said, "Be safe." I went back to work. If you mapped the exploitation, it wasn't a straight line. It was a loop. I paid, the pressure eased, the gratitude arrived, the expectations reset, the next ask came. The loop only breaks when you change the inputs. I didn't change them for a long time because changing them felt like setting off an alarm I wasn't ready to hear. I want to be clear about something for anyone tracking the legal side. Those 3 years of payments were voluntary. I wasn't scammed on those transfers. I wasn't tricked. I chose badly and I chose often. That matters because when the real fraud appears, you need to know I know the difference. A wire under Article 4A is not a Zelle split or a card charge you regret. It lives in a different part of the rulebook and it requires a different kind of response. That context matters later when I ask for audit logs instead of refunds and preservation letters instead of pity. If you're listening and recognizing yourself, here's the sentence I wish someone had handed me sooner. Boundaries are not a punishment. They are a system. If you do not build one, someone else will build one for you and send you the bill. The sacrifice pattern didn't explode. It accumulated. It built a rhythm that felt like care and sounded like loyalty. Then one Tuesday morning, the number on the Grandpa Care Fund dropped to 0. That is where part 3 begins. Suspicion did not announce itself. It arrived like a glitch, like a mistaken view, like a finance app refreshing twice. I wrote down the time, I called the branch, and for the first time in 3 years I stopped solving and started investigating. Suspicion didn't arrive with a plot twist. It arrived as a number. 0. I saw it on a Tuesday morning the way I always check the Grandpa Care Fund before coffee, and for a full second I thought I had clicked into the wrong view. I hadn't. The balance was gone. I wrote the time down. Then I called the branch. The manager's voice was steady in that way people get when they've walked more than a few customers back from the edge. She asked for dates. I asked for audit history. I didn't ask for a refund. I asked for logs because logs are the bones of a story. When she pulled the internal activity, there were 2 in-branch sessions the week prior and 3 banker-assisted wire initiations. That jumped me from worry to strategy. We had a revoked power of attorney on file from 2021. If anyone was waving an old copy around the system, should have flagged it. If my name appeared on wire forms, I knew what my own hand looked like. I called my attorney before I called my parents. She sent litigation hold letters to the bank immediately, which meant everything related to my account had to be preserved. She also laid out the sequence we would coordinate with law enforcement, not grandstand, request copies through proper channels, and keep the emerging timeline clean of speculation. That became my script. Breadcrumb by breadcrumb, the picture sharpened. First, the audit log showed those in-branch sessions tied to the private banking room. My attorney and I reviewed the bank's notes in person with the manager view, only no copies. A day later, Detective Priya Kapoor was assigned and obtained the relevant surveillance stills. I didn't parade a screenshot around. I sat in my counsel's office and looked at a monitor, my father and my sister in the private banking room, a pen between them, my name on a wire form. It felt like seeing a forged passport with my face and someone else's birthday. We asked the manager a simple question. If the POA revocation was filed in 2021, why wasn't that the first thing the frontline banker saw? The answer was boring and damning. The archive showed the revocation. The interface the banker used did not display it prominently. It was a gap, not a conspiracy. That gap made it easy for my family to do the next thing, present an old POA to create comfort, then sign forms as if they were me to avoid agent scrutiny. Later compliance would flag the signature capture. The loop on the D in my last name doesn't exist in my handwriting. It does in my sister's. That observation wasn't official yet, it was Evan's overlay, so we treated it as a visual hint, not evidence. Breadcrumb 4 was mine alone. I drove to the bank's safe deposit box that same night and inventoried what should have been there. In the folder, I label receipts. I found 4 slips from a bullion dealer, 1 kilogram bars stamped and serialized, purchased the same day as the first wire. 260,000 each, just over 1.04 million total. Instant liquidity you can carry. Breadcrumb 5 was uglier. In the same folder, tucked under a cufflink my grandfather never wore, was a torn note with a first name, a burner number, and an address in an industrial park I didn't recognize. I didn't play detective. I emailed the note to my attorney and put the original in a plastic sleeve. The next day, we learned the address matched a storage facility on the edge of a city where nobody asks questions as long as your payment's clear. We did not stroll into the storage office asking for camera footage. My attorney secured a subpoena. Detective Kapoor requested the gate keypad logs and exterior CCTV. The facility produced a clean export entries tied to individual pins, each pin mapped to a tenant. One of those pins was assigned to an account rented under my mother's maiden name. The license plate reader hit on my sister's car came from Detective Kapoor's access, not me. I saw the still because she showed it to me in a conference room and told me to breathe. Around this time, the message hit my phone, "Stop now or he dies." It came from a prepaid line that was dead within a day. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my attorney, who sent carrier preservation notices and obtained a subpoena for subscriber and tower data. What matters legally is that I didn't handle the chain of custody myself. A few days later, an aunt forwarded a screenshot from the family group chat, Diane saying, "If she serves him today, we move the rest tonight." The aunt gave my counsel's e-discovery vendor the actual phone for imaging. Screenshots are conversation pieces. Forensic images are evidence. The emotional gear shift happened in a bathroom at Lydia's baby shower on April 12, 2025. Pastels, cupcakes, the kind of tiny sandwiches that pretend to be charming. I was washing my hands when I heard my mother's voice through the vent. Not the words at first, just her tone, the brand new plan tone. When the sentence came through, "If she serves him today, we move the rest tonight," I felt my shoulders go cold. I stepped back into the main room and saw the process server approach my sister. He did what professionals do. Confirmed her name quietly, handed over the packet, walked out. No speech, no drama. I didn't make one either. I connected my phone to the venue screen and put up 4 slides. Date and time of my zero balance login. Timeline of in-branch sessions and wires labeled pending verification. The existence of a revoked POA on file since 2021. A simple flow showing bullion purchases and the storage facility address tied to a tenant account under my mother's maiden name. That's all. No raw bank footage, no LPR screenshots. I closed by saying I would post links to the public docket as filings appeared. If anyone had questions, counsel's contact was on the last slide. 10 family members saw it, and that was the point. Privacy had protected the problem. Sunlight would protect my grandfather. Evan worked in the background. He took the signature images the bank let us view in office and built a clean side-by-side overlay that showed the loop on the D and the pressure points where someone hesitated, mimicking my name. We labeled it visual aid because only a certified examiner can call it an opinion. He also stacked the audit log times against the storage gate entries and highlighted the overlap. When you lined them up, the choreography was obvious. Wire, buy, store, repeat. Marjorie, the charge nurse who has known my grandfather for years, stepped from friend to validator in one call. She asked me to come by after visiting hours and walked me to administration to file a formal note about unusual badge activity near my grandfather's room. She did not accuse anyone by name. She did what professionals do. She put facts in a system that can act on them. That is how Detective Kapoor entered the story, with a badge and a schedule. It's also how we got to the sentence that snaps our timeline into focus 2 weeks later. There's a reason I keep repeating the steps. People think betrayal is a moment. It isn't. It's a set of decisions made in sequence by people who count on you not connecting the dots. The dots were all there: a revoked POA ignored by a frontline interface, forged signatures presented as mine. To avoid agent scrutiny, 4 serialized gold bars, a tenant pin that wasn't mine, a burner text with a threat, a bathroom sentence about moving the rest tonight. Put them on a board and they look like a plot. Put them in the right order and they become proof. By the end of that week, the fund wasn't just empty. It had a map. And once a theft has a map, it also has a destination. Mine was an ICU corridor at 2:17 a.m. on May 3, 2025, where discovery stops being theoretical and becomes a conversation with consequences. Awakening didn't feel like triumph. It felt like finally hearing a sound that had been playing under every conversation for years. Once the timeline was on the wall, the story stopped being a feeling and became a sequence. That's when the three layers separated. First layer, the surface betrayal, what happened, no adjectives needed. A fund I built for my grandfather's care was emptied through 3 banker-assisted wires. A revoked power of attorney on file since 2021 was waived to lower scrutiny, then set aside so my name could be signed as if I were present. 4 serialized 1 kilogram gold bars were purchased the same day the first wire hit. The rest of the money pivoted toward the kind of channels people use when they want speed and forget that everything leaves a mark. Those are just facts. You can disagree with my tone. You cannot disagree with dates. Second layer, the deeper conspiracy, who moved with whom. It wasn't a mastermind, it was a choreography. My father Richard set the appointments and played the "We're family, we already have papers" on file card. My mother Diane rented a storage unit under her maiden name so her current ID wouldn't cross-reference easily with anything bearing our family surname. Lydia, my sister, presented confidence like a credential and signed where my name belonged, favoring the same loop on the D she has used since high school. A nurse practitioner who used to float through my grandfather's unit knew enough about shift changes to pick quieter doorways. She wasn't family. She was an access point. Each person did the piece that felt normal to them. That's why it worked until it didn't. Third layer, the pattern, how long the plan had been warming. Detective Priya pulled interface notes and confirmed something the branch manager had admitted. The frontline banker's screen didn't surface the 2021 revocation as loudly as the archive did. Boring gap, useful to people who rely on gaps. In prior months, there were documentation refresh touches on the account. Nothing that moved money, just the kind of cautious taps people use to see which doors unlocked. The minute the path looked smooth, they moved fast wire buy store repeat. That sequence showed up the same way in 3 places at once. Audit logs, bullion receipts, storage, keypad entries. The plan wasn't brilliant. It was practiced. The moment those layers clicked, everything got louder and sharper. I remember the antiseptic drift of the hospital air when Marjorie walked me to administration to file the unusual badge note. Food court coffee too sweet and too hot cooling in my hand while a clerk stamped a form. In the storage facility lot a few nights later, I stood on gravel that crunched like glass when I shifted my weight and looked at a roll-up door I had never seen before. I didn't try to open it. I didn't need to. Seeing the place was enough to make denial feel ridiculous. The sky was too blue for a revelation like that. It stayed blue anyway. The threat text finally made functional sense once we laid motive over method. Stop now or he dies wasn't theatrical, it was targeted. If Grandpa testified that we revoked the POA and confirmed my role as his agent had ended in 2021, the old paper they dangled would collapse. If the investigation matured, the paper trail to bullion and the storage tenant pin would too. The message was leverage, not drama. My attorney said it plainly, they're trying to stop your witness and freeze your timeline. We answered with process preservation letters to the carrier, a subpoena for subscriber and tower data, and a report to Adult Protective Services. Fear looked smaller when it sat next to paperwork. There was one gap in my understanding I had to close before I let myself be angry. Why sign as me at all if you were going to present a POA? Detective Priya walked me through the logic. Presenting an old POA can relax a banker who is moving fast, but signing as agent can trigger extra review. If you believe your performance will pass a casual glance, you sign as the principal and rely on convenience to carry you through. It's lazy fraud, which is often the most effective kind until a detail-oriented person gets involved. The next conversation was with the bank's compliance group. I didn't ask them to rewrite the last week. I asked for the control points they would preserve. They identified the notary log tied to the in-branch sessions. They marked the signature capture file where the pressure wavered in places my hand doesn't. They committed to producing everything to law enforcement on request. The manager apologized for the interface gap. I accepted the apology and asked when the hold notice would hit their internal systems. It's a different kind of power to ask for timestamps instead of sympathy. Back at my kitchen table, Evan built a board the way he would prep a data review sources fields joins. On the left, audit logs with precise times. In the middle, bullion receipts with serial numbers and cashier stamps. On the right gate, keypad entries mapped to the tenant PIN assigned to the account rented under my mother's maiden name. Over that, he overlaid my viewing of the signature capture, labeled clearly as a visual aid, and left a placeholder for the certified examiner's report. Above everything, he typed one sentence: everything leaves a record. It was almost comforting. Marjorie called that night, and for the first time her voice sounded tired. She said she had seen a badge near Grandpa's room that didn't belong to the on-duty team. No accusation, just detail. She asked permission to elevate the concern through the proper channel so the hospital could look at access logs and camera angles without triggering gossip. I said yes. Hospitals move on documentation. So do courts. So do banks when you give them no choice. All of this, the three layers, the sensory snapshots, the clean board, led to the same place. There would be a moment where the story stops being an outline and becomes an event. We chose it because waiting would mean handing the initiative back. An ICU corridor at 2:17 a.m. on May 3rd, 2025 is not dramatic because I say it is. It is dramatic because procedure is dramatic when you have skin in the game. Security would stand where they always stand. Detective Priya would do what she always does, ask direct questions, document direct answers. My job would be to shut up, stand still, and let the work I had already done carry the room. This is the part of the story where people expect rage. Rage is easy. Clarity is harder. Clarity told me who did what, where, when, and why it made sense to them. Clarity also told me what would matter to a judge, a jury, and a hospital board. That is what awakening looks like when you are the responsible one who finally stops being the landing. I did not become someone else. I became exact. We were 2 weeks past the baby shower, 10 days past the threat text, and hours away from the corridor. I set 2 alarms and a reminder to eat something before midnight. Then I sat in the quiet and practiced a sentence that would keep me from saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. I'll let my attorney speak to that. It sounds small, it's actually a boundary. When the alarm went off, I put on a sweater I've worn to product launches and funerals and brushed my hair into a low ponytail that wouldn't read as disheveled on camera. I picked up a folder I didn't need to open because its contents were already in evidence queues, and I drove toward a hallway where the light would be too white and the floor would be too clean and the question would be exact. We need to talk about access and intent. The morning after we locked the timeline, I stopped every family autopay. Mortgage, cards, the networking car, all of it. One email to my parents with a single sentence. All financial support is paused pending the outcome of an active investigation. Please direct any questions to counsel. No exclamation points, no explanations. I changed passwords, rotated two-factor authentication on every bank relationship, and asked my private banker to close and reissue account numbers on anything that had ever touched the Grandpa Care Fund, then documented the call time in my ledger. When you've been the cushion for 3 years, the first hard edge you set surprises everyone, including you. My attorney moved first because that's how you keep evidence clean. Litigation hold letters were already in place at the bank. Now she sent preservation notices to the telecom carrier tied to the threat text and to the storage facility for keypad and camera exports. She opened a civil complaint draft conversion fraud identity theft and prepped a motion for a temporary restraining order to freeze proceeds traceable to the wires. None of that went online. It went into a folder labeled Filings where things become real. We met bank compliance in a glass room that smelled like coffee and printer toner. I didn't ask for apologies. I asked for timestamps. When did the hold notice hit their internal system? When would the notary log and signature capture file be ready for law enforcement production? Which frontline interface would be updated so the 2021 POA revocation surfaced like a red light, not a footnote? The manager walked through their steps in plain English and confirmed they'd cooperate with Detective Priya's requests. I thanked her and wrote down the time she said today. Detective Priya made the calls I couldn't. She pulled the license plate reader hit legally and added the still to the case file. She served the storage facility with the subpoena my attorney drafted. She handled the bullion dealer too. Through counsel, we asked them to verify serial numbers and hold resale on the 4 bars we could identify while law enforcement sorted out ownership. I did not play amateur cop. I sat at my kitchen table and updated a spreadsheet titled Sources Custodian Status. I filed an FTC identity theft report and placed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus, then froze my credit outright. Check systems got a security alert as well. Those steps weren't cinematic, but they closed doors my family liked walking through. I also called hospital administration with Marjorie by my side and asked for 2 things: a visitor list restricted by name and a hard password for any phone inquiry about my grandfather. They set both, then documented them in the chart. We didn't argue about intent. We documented access and shut the windows. The Ferrari was its own chapter. It was titled to me because I had been told it would build Lydia's brand, and I was too tired to argue at the time. Now it was an asset I needed back. My attorney filed for a writ of replevin, and the court granted it. We scheduled a pickup time that didn't look like a spectacle. Before the truck rolled, I called the insurer and revoked permissive use for Lydia, updated the garaging address, and removed her as a driver on the policy. Paper, first toe second. When the flatbed rolled away later, it carried more than a car. It carried the end of a story I should never have agreed to begin. The family group chat leak went to my counsel's e-discovery vendor for a proper forensic image. Screenshots are pretty. Bit-for-bit captures hold up. My aunt signed a short chain of custody statement at the vendor's office, and I wrote the time in my case ledger because I have learned to respect small times as much as big numbers. The prepaid line that sent "Stop now or he dies" traced to a convenience store purchase captured on a camera above a key copy kiosk that same afternoon. Detective Priya tied those threads, not me, and she did it with paperwork, not performance. Adult Protective Services opened a file after my attorney's referral. That triggered a parallel track I wanted from day one. A system designed to protect elders stepped in and told the hospital, the bank, and my family that there would be eyes on this. APS isn't theater, it is form and follow-through. Knowing they were in the loop changed the temperature of every room I walked into. I kept one public line ready on my phone. When the docket posts, I'll link it here. Until then, I won't discuss details. I sent the same message to relatives who asked to talk privately. When filings are public, we can. Until then, please contact my attorney. Gossip dies fast without new fuel. With the bank's production queued, storage logs preserved, and hospital access locked down, we scheduled a controlled ICU contact for May 30, 2025 at 2:17 a.m. Security stayed in position. Detective Priya checked her body cam. I rehearsed one line. I'll let my attorney speak to that. Procedure over performance. Power shifted. I ended the 3-year autopay loop. The burden of proof moved to a case file. When my mother called it a misunderstanding, I said, "Please direct any further questions to my attorney," and hung up. At 2:17 a.m., Priya asked, "We need to talk about access and intent." No scene. Statements taken, badges noted, timestamps logged. The nurse practitioner was placed on leave by morning. APS updated restrictions. The hospital issued a memo and added a hard password only 2 people knew. The writ of Replevine cleared. The insurer revoked Lydia's permissive use. The tow truck took the Ferrari. By late May 2025, the docket posted. I linked to the filings, no adjectives, just records. Lydia's employer put her on leave. My parents emailed. I routed everything through counsel. The bank packaged notary logs and signature capture files. The bullion dealer froze the 4 serialized bars and later flagged an attempted resale. I kept my promise, post filings only. No commentary. Consequences followed. NP license suspended pending investigation. APS stayed active and the house went quiet. No autopays, no quick calls. I briefed my own HR for transparency. Justice felt proportional. The rest is recovery.